As the great Yogi Berra once said, it's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. Nevertheless, in this video, I'm going to predict 5 ways that I think that wine collecting will be changing in the future. Whether you're a wine investor, a wine collector, or just a wine enthusiast, you'll want to pay close attention to these predictions because they could impact everything from wine fraud to the wines that you might want to consider for your collection to the relationship that wineries have with their consumers. Of course, as always, I'm certainly interested in hearing from you as well. So please let me know in the comments below if you have any predictions that you think will impact wine collecting in the future. The first prediction is I think that there will be an expansion of wines that are considered to be collectible fine wines. This is true not just for wines that are considered at auction, but also I think that going forward, wine collectors will definitely want to diversify their collection and include some wines from some emerging fine wine regions that are making world-class wines at a fraction of the cost of some other collectible wines. Here there's a few factors at play. First, there's many consumers that are craving world-class wines at affordable prices. But unfortunately, high-end Burgundy, for example, has prices that are in the stratosphere, and first growth Bordeaux and some high-end Napa wines are also beyond the reach of many customers. In addition, many younger wine collectors think of Bordeaux as being something for their grandparents to drink, and they prefer to drink wines from lesser-known regions, perhaps emerging wine regions that haven't become popular yet. Another factor is that due to climate change and global warming, there's now some emerging wine regions that are producing world-class wines that in the past had climates that were too marginal and erratic to consistently produce high-quality wines year in and year out. Germany, for example, has been a huge beneficiary of global warming and is now producing world-class wines on a much more consistent basis than it did in the past. Last year, one of my wine goals was to purchase more German Pinot Noir, or Spätburgunder, and I certainly did start loading up on that for my own collection. In addition, I also tried some Pinot Noir from Switzerland, which was also extremely intriguing. So here, I expect that as more consumers become aware of some of the extremely high-quality Pinot Noir you can get from countries like Germany and Switzerland, that many consumers will follow my lead and do the same thing that I've been doing, which is purchasing some of that outstanding Pinot Noir at a fraction of the price of some comparable high-quality Burgundy. This prediction is not limited to Pinot Noir. It also extends to other categories such as sparkling wine. Champagne prices have also rallied dramatically in the past couple years, and I know that personally, I'm getting a little bit frustrated with some of the extreme high pricing for vintage champagne. As such, I've been considering sparkling wine made in the traditional method in places like Tasmania, the United Kingdom, and Germany. Sektos Romland in Germany, for example, is doing a tremendous job. A key takeaway on this point is definitely to start branching out and considering some of the high-quality names from some of these emerging wine regions. You may find that you really enjoy them and that you're able to save a lot of money by purchasing some of these wines instead of the wines that you've been purchasing historically. I'm not going to predict any radical immediate downturn for wine regions like Bordeaux or Burgundy, especially at the high end, as I think those areas will continue to do well. Napa Valley, I think, will generally do well also, although I do think that there could be some inventory pressure for some high-end cult wines that sell for very large prices. But I definitely think that one thing that you'll see in the not too distant future is that auctions include a wide variety of wines and much more than just your typical Burgundy, Bordeaux, Napa Valley wines and the usual high-end collectible wine. Part of this is driven by the fact that now many auctions are available to people online, and so the bidders are no longer just the select few who get invitations to attend these auctions in person. Especially when coupled with the pricing considerations I discussed earlier, this expansion of the auction market in terms of those who are participating will also lead to an expansion of the wines that do well at auction. So on a going forward basis, I would expect that you'll see wines like Catena, Senya, and Don Melchor, among others from South America, doing better and better at auction. Perhaps some names like Hill of Grace from Australia, and many more. My next prediction is that in the future, the wineries that are the most successful are those that not just make outstanding wines, but also those that focus on the relationship with their consumer in terms of offering unique and enriching experiences that make the customer better appreciate the story behind the wine. Many of the younger consumers, such as those in Generation Z, prefer to support brands when they know the story behind those brands and they know that their values align with those of the producer. In addition, many people these days value experiences far more than just having a big collection of wine at home that they may enjoy with a small group of people or even just with their family. Certainly, based on the success of events like La Palais and La Fête du Champagne, I can see that there's a huge market for these sorts of special experiences. So I think that wineries that would offer these sorts of experiences themselves, or perhaps with another group of similarly situated wineries, will do well in the future. Certainly, I know that many wineries in the United States will offer complimentary tastings for their customers who visit. That's certainly well and good, but I'm thinking about something even more special than that. I think that many consumers would want to have a special tasting where they get to try library or rare vintages from a producer, where they do perhaps broad comparison tastings where they can see how the wines evolve with age, or where they get to meet the winemaker or some of the principals or owners behind the winery. Just to give you one example of a winery that is offering memorable experiences, there's a winery that I visited in Yarra Valley, Australia a few months ago that offers helicopter rides from Melbourne to the winery and back again. Of course, once you arrive at the winery, you'll have a number of high-quality experiences, including a world-class meal from the on-site restaurant that features courses prepared using lots of ingredients that are grown right in the garden on site, as well as courses that are paired with the wines from the estate. And you can, of course, tour the wine cellar and the vineyard while you're there. Many wineries are also embracing wine tourism in a positive way by having hotels right on site as well. Some of the wineries that are doing a tremendous job with this include Viña Vic in Chile, Smith Haut Lafitte in Bordeaux, and Michele Chiarlo in Barolo. There's certainly many more wineries doing an excellent job with this as well, but certainly the experience that they can offer once you're staying on the property can be extremely memorable and one that forms a long-lasting bond with the consumer. My next prediction is that technology will continue to play an even bigger role in wine collecting in the future. Wine fraud is a $3 billion industry, and it's certainly a huge problem, especially for those who collect high-end wines. Technology, though, I think can play a big part in helping to battle and combat wine fraud. Currently, we're seeing companies like Entropy that are able to use artificial intelligence and other technologies to help verify authenticity of products, such as high-end collectible wine. There's also a company named Club de Vin that's using digital cork technology, which relies on the blockchain to help prove chain of ownership and to verify authenticity. There's a number of very high-end producers, such as Chateau Angelus, that have embraced this digital cork technology and done drops of some of their library vintages through Club de Vin. The increased and more widespread use of these technologies on a going forward basis should definitely help to combat fraud, and many consumers may actually insist on digital authentication before they engage in high volume or high dollar transactions. It would be naive to think wine fraud would be entirely eradicated, but I think that what we'll see is that the use of these new technologies helps to deter wine fraud at the high end of the wine market and instead perhaps encourages more wine fraud at the lower end of the spectrum. For example, in the past year or two, I've seen a number of headlines exposing situations where various bad actors have taken fruit that's less expensive from countries like Spain, imported it into France, and tried to pass it off as more expensive French wine. My next prediction is that sustainability will become increasingly important, and that those few wineries that don't embrace sustainable principles, not just in their vineyard, but throughout their entire operation, may very well be left behind and lose market share. It's been absolutely amazing to me to see how rapidly Many wine producers all around the world have embraced sustainable farming methods in the past 12 to 15 years. When I first started visiting Napa Valley in 2007, for example, I didn't hear very many producers talk about organic farming methods. Similarly, when I visited Bordeaux for the first time in 2013, I visited Pontet Canet and learned that they were very much at the forefront of the transition to organic and biodynamic methods, and that very few other wineries at that time were following their lead. But I just visited Bordeaux a couple months ago, and I was absolutely shocked at the number of wineries that have embraced sustainable principles, not just in the vineyard, but in all aspects of their operations. Now that we've seen so many wineries embrace organic farming methods, I think one of the next battlegrounds to play out publicly will be the weight of wine bottles. For example, Pontet Canet recently reduced the weight of its bottle, and beginning with the 2022 vintage, the weight of its bottle will be reduced from more than 800 grams to less than 500 grams per bottle. This has resulted in a 38% reduction in CO2 emissions from each Pontet Canet bottle. So I think that on a going forward basis, we'll see a continuation of this trend where a number of wineries will embrace sustainable practices in all aspects of their business. This will be rewarded particularly by consumers such as those in Generation Z that embrace sustainable principles and that want to align themselves with brands that have the same values that they do. By the same token, I think we can also expect to see situations where producers that don't get on board and who, for example, will continue to sell their wine in very heavy wine bottles may be made examples of, and there may be some unfavorable headlines that hurt their reputation and perhaps result in lost sales. If you're interested in wine recommendations, wine collecting strategies, and learning more about wine, please do subscribe to my channel. I've been collecting wine for more than 15 years and also have a level 4 diploma from the WSET. So I have both formal certification as well as substantial practical knowledge from the School of Hard Knocks. My next prediction is that Asia will become an increasingly important player in the wine collecting scene and take on an even bigger share of allocation of some high-end collectible wines that are coveted by collectors worldwide. Wine consumption has been on the decline, particularly in countries like France and other places that have been more established markets for high-end wine. But Asia is seeing tremendous enthusiasm and excitement for the world of wine generally. The WSET, for example, is seeing record enrollment numbers throughout Asia. Hong Kong has long been a haven for wine auctions and for wine enthusiasts generally, as they've offered more favorable tax treatment for wine than most places in Asia. But more recently, we're also seeing some free trade agreements between places like China and Australia that have resulted in dramatic increases in imports from Australia to China. And even South Korea has reduced tariffs on wines from the United States in the EU, which has definitely helped to increase imports to South Korea as well. In Asia, there's also a huge premiumization trend, with lots of wine collectors demanding luxury wines and high-end collectible wines from places like Burgundy, Bordeaux, Napa Valley, and some other big names from throughout the wine collecting world. I visited Singapore about a year and a half ago, and I was absolutely blown away by the amount of opportunities that wine enthusiasts have to enjoy high-quality wine pretty much any night of the week. In fact, I would say that I could probably have a better wine experience in either Singapore or Hong Kong on a typical weeknight than I could in most cities in the United States. I visit more than 100 wineries every single year, and one of the questions that I ask most frequently is, what are your top 3 export markets for your wines? Almost invariably, every single winery I visit will have Asia or some countries from Asia in their top 3. This is even true with respect to wineries in regions like Willamette Valley that you wouldn't expect as necessarily being big exporters to Asia. I also think that a lot of the statistics may underrepresent the amount of wine that's actually being shipped to Asia currently. When I visited Bordeaux, for example, many of the wineries explained that they don't have visibility into the final destination for a lot of their wines, but that they do know that a lot of their wine that first gets shipped to London ultimately makes its way to Asia at some point in the distribution channel thereafter. So in terms of takeaways associated with this prediction, I think on a going forward basis, we may see higher percentages of highly coveted collectible wines being shipped directly to Asia. This could make it more difficult for those of you who live in other parts of the world to secure and track down some of these elusive collectible wines. While some of you may think I'm being overly dramatic, in the case of some high-end Burgundy, for example, allocations are already so low, it's not going to take much of a reduction for those allocations to go away entirely. For example, one of the wine stores in Dallas that serves wine collectors and has high demand for large numbers of collectible wines will often get as little as one bottle of many examples of high-end Burgundy. So it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility for that store to lose its allocation of a number of wines if there were reductions in the number of exports from Burgundy to Texas, for example. I publish numerous videos on all aspects of wine collecting. If you're interested in learning my wine goals for 2025, please check out this video that's linked above.